October 31st marked the 500th year anniversary of Martin Luther beginning his famous protest against the Catholic Church. The Protestant Reformation he began changed the lives of millions of people in Europe, how they lived, how they worked, what art they created, and even what they ate and drank. The change was so impactful it even affected the favorite beverage of Luther's native Germany, beer. Hey beer nerds, this is Ryan, and today we're going to examine one of the pivotal moments in beer history, the Protestant Reformation. Yeah, I know we generally don't spend a ton of time on the Protestant Reformation in history class, but it's actually really important when it comes to the evolution of beer production in the Middle Ages. If you're excited for some more great beer history, be sure to smash that like button down below. Let's get started. In the 16th century, the Catholic Church held a controlled monopoly over most beer production in Europe, and they accomplished this stranglehold through a monopoly on gruit production. Gruit was a mixture of herbs and spices.
A long time ago, Colonel Sanders created KFC's original recipe fried chicken with its blend of 11 herbs and spices.
No, not those herbs and spices. Gruit was much more of a mixture of herbs and botanicals like yarrow, ground ivy, heather, rosemary, juniper berries, ginger, cinnamon, and that mixture was used to preserve and flavor beer. At the time, gruit was the main flavoring agent in beer. If you had asked a brewer in the Middle Ages what ingredients they needed to brew, they would have told you water, gruit, malts, and if they were really savvy, some yeast. But if you're a regular viewer on this channel, you know that this list isn't quite right. We're missing hops here. In the 16th century, hops were considered pretty undesirable and were generally viewed as a weed to be ignored. They actually grew pretty plentifully throughout Europe and were generally thought of as an invasive species. Thus, using this plant for anything was untaxed. Unlike gruit, brewers had to purchase from the church. The church really didn't like hops, says William Botswick, a beer critic for the Wall Street Journal. One reason was the 12th century German mystic and abbess Hildegard had pronounced that hops were not very good for you because they make, quote, the soul of a man sad and weigh down his inner organs. So if you were a Protestant brewer and wanted to thumb your nose at Catholicism, you bet you would put hops in your beer instead of herbs. But even a little before Luther started his famous protest, some Bavarian princes were already trying to push for hopped beers. In 1516, for instance, a Bavarian law mandated that beer could be made only with hops, water, and barley. But Luther's revolt gave the weed a significant boost. The fact that hops were tax-free constituted only part of the draw. Hops had other qualities that appealed to the brand new movement, mainly that it was really good at preserving beer. At the time, most herbs and spices used for brewing had preservative qualities, but with hops, beer could travel really well, which led to it being put in every beer that was going to be shipped somewhere else. And so it became a unit of international trade that symbolized the growing business class in Europe, which was tangentially connected with the Protestant work ethic and new capitalist ideas. Another great reason brewers wanted to use hops is that they had sedative properties. That mystic Hildegard was right. Martin Luther himself once wrote, "I sleep 6 or 7 hours running and afterwards 2 or 3. I'm sure it's owing to the beer." He wrote this while visiting various Bavarian towns and drinking all of their delicious hopped beers. Now you might think that a mellowing effect would not be a very desirable characteristic, but consider the alternative. Some gruits contained herbs and spices that were hallucinogenic or aphrodisiacs, which, as one could imagine, could cause some problems for those boisterous German drinkers after a pint or two. Imagine sitting down to a couple pints and then looking up to see a werewolf drinking beer across the bar. I think I'd rather have some hop beers that make me a little sleepy instead. If the Catholic Church lost control over the printed word with the invention of the printing press, it definitely lost control of beer with the rise in the use of hops. In an age where water was unsafe, beer was drunk by everyone and was nutritional and social fuel, especially in Germany. It was a natural and very common part of every household. It's almost like a pot of coffee always simmering on your countertop. Back then, it was a kettle of beer. Beer was brewed less for pure enjoyment than for medicinal reasons and for pure sustenance. Beers were richer and heartier back then, and beer was a great source of calories for the lower class who did not have access to rich foods. And Martin Luther himself really loved beer. He mentioned it constantly in his letters, and not surprisingly, beer pops up at pivotal moments in Luther's life, most notably after taking on the formidable might of the Catholic Church. An unruffled Luther famously declared that God and the Word did everything, while I drink beer with my friends Philipp and Amsdorf. Luther's teachings were mocked as sour beer, and one of his critics disparaged him as a heretic from the filthy market town of Wittenberg, populated by, quote, a barbarous people who make their living from breweries and saloons. But as he gained fame, he became a popular hero. A range of Lutheran merchandise was launched, including beer mugs that featured the Pope as the Antichrist. When the excommunicated Luther married the runaway nun Catherine von Bora, the town council gave the couple a barrel of excellent Einbeck beer. This was a fitting gift. Beer was also to assume an even more central role in Luther's life thanks to his wife. The intelligent, talented, and exceptionally competent Katharina not only bore 6 children, but managed the Luther's large household. And then she opened a brewery that produced thousands of pints of beer each year. Her initial attempts produced a thin, weak beer, but she soon got the hang of it and learned exactly how much malt to add to suit her husband's tastes. Luther was ecstatic. Lord Katie, as he affectionately called her, had assured him a steady supply of beer even when Wittenberg's breweries ran dry. Martin Luther may have been best known for what he wrote about the church, but it's pretty clear he's high amongst the ranks of saints within beer history. He not only loved beer, but he greatly popularized hop beer across Middle Europe. If you like great stories of beer history, please smash that like button down below. It really helps other beer nerds find quality beer content. And if you want to be alerted each time we publish a beer video, hit that subscribe button. Once again, this has been Ryan with Beer by the Numbers, and I'll see you in our next video.